All right, let's dive into Iron Fist. You know that 2017 Netflix show? The one with the kung fu and the glowing fish?
Yeah, Iron Fist, part of the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe thing.
Exactly. We've got a ton of articles, wikis, and reviews here all about this show. And, you guys sent these in because this show, well, it kind of stirred up some strong opinions.
Definitely, and I think that's what makes it so fascinating to dissect.
Right, like critics basically tore it apart, but a lot of fans, they really dug it. So what's the story there?
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you said strong opinions. See, what's interesting here is that it's not just a typical love it or hate it kind of deal.
It's more than that.
Oh, way more. We're talking about a massive gap between how the critics saw it and how the audience responded.
Okay, so like what kind of gap are we talking about?
Well, for season 1, critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 20% approval rating. Brutal, right?
Ouch. Yeah, that's pretty rough.
But here's the kicker. The audience score. Over 70%.
Whoa, seriously, that's huge. So were critics just being way too harsh? Or were fans missing something?
Maybe both. Maybe neither. That's what we're here to unpack. To really understand that disconnect, we got to dig into the show itself.
Okay, good point. So, like, reminder time. What's the basic premise of Iron Fist?
All right, so we've got Danny Rand, our Iron Fist. He pops back into New York City after being, presumed dead for like 15 years.
Yeah, the whole Lost Air Returns thing, classic.
Totally. But here's the twist. He's been training in this mystical city called Kunlun, mastering martial arts. And get this, he gains the power of the Iron Fist.
Which basically means...
Superpowered punch. He can channel the Shi energy and bam! Instant knockout.
Right. I remember the glowing fist thing.
Yeah.
But it's not all about punching, is it?
Nope, not just punching. He's back to reclaim his family legacy, the Rand Corporation. Big business, lots of drama. But, of course, there's a catch.
Oh, what's the catch?
The Hand.
Yep.
This ancient, super secretive organization. They're all about kung fu, too, but on the, let's say, evil side of things.
Right. And this is where things get interesting, or, well, some would say messy.
Exactly. Because this is where some of the critics started throwing shade. They called the plot slow, way too complicated, and maybe even a little too disconnected from the other Marvel Netflix shows.
Yeah, I get that. At the time, there was Daredevil, Jessica Jones. Those shows were dark, gritty, super intense.
Exactly. Very different vibe.
So were the Iron Fist criticisms fair? I mean, personally, I felt like the show took its time to really flesh out Danny's backstory, build that world of Kunlun. It wasn't just bam, bam, bam right from the start.
That's a really interesting point, and it makes me wonder, what were people expecting from Iron Fist? Were they hoping for another action-packed Marvel thrill ride? Or was there room for something a bit different, a show that went deeper into the mystical side of the comics, explored themes of identity, loss, even what it means to belong?
It definitely felt like it was trying to do something different, which maybe explains why it clicked with some viewers but totally missed the mark with others.
Huh?
But before we dive into all that, let's talk characters. Because some of the supporting roles, man, they really sucked me in.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Especially Ward Meacham. Talk about a roller coaster.
Ward Meacham, yeah, he's a great example of how Iron Fist kind of flips the script on you. Starts off as your typical corporate bad guy, right? Ambition, greed, all that jazz. But then things start to shift.
He's definitely not a one-dimensional villain, that's for sure.
Not at all. As the series goes on, he's gotta face the consequences of his actions, and you see him wrestle with guilt, regret, and then ultimately this desire to, make things right.
Yeah. It's almost like he embodies that dark side of the corporate world,
Yeah.
that ends justify the means mentality. And his relationship with Danny, that's a whole other layer of complexity. They start off as enemies, but then...
Things get messy. From straight-up hostility to this uneasy alliance, and maybe, just maybe, even a hint of friendship in there.
It's definitely not your typical hero-villain dynamic. They push each other's buttons, challenge each other, and in a way, they force each other to confront their own, let's say, inner demons.
Exactly. And that complexity, it's not limited to those two. It extends to other characters, too. Colleen Wing, for example.
Colleen. Oh, she's so badass. A total martial arts master, a ride-or-die friend. And she can definitely hold her own in a fight.
Absolutely. And what I love about Colleen is that she's not just there as Danny's sidekick or love interest. She's got her own agency, her own goals, and her own struggles.
She's a great example of how Iron Fist, even with its flaws, did try to showcase strong, independent female characters.
Totally agree. And her dynamic with Danny, it's a relationship built on mutual respect, understanding. They're equals.
So to recap, we've got this morally gray world, a brooding hero trying to find his place. and a supporting cast that keeps you guessing. But there's another piece of the puzzle we got to talk about, and it's a big one. The look of the show.
Ah, the visual style.
Yeah. I remember watching it and thinking, this is dark, like really dark. Is this a kung fu show or a film noir?
Well, that darkness wasn't just for looks. They were using this new tech at the time, high dynamic range, or HDR.
HDR. Okay, so what does that mean?
It was cutting edge. It allowed for way more colors, contrasts, all that. But honestly, it seems like maybe the team was still kind of figuring out how to use it properly.
So that explains why some of those fight scenes, even though they were beautifully choreographed, super authentic martial arts style, sometimes they were hard to actually see what was going on.
Right. They were going for gritty, realistic, but it might have tipped over into too murky.
Makes sense. And that brings us to another point of debate. The action itself. Some critics, they loved it. Praised the authenticity, the grounded approach.
Right, sticking to real martial arts, but then others, they found it slow, not flashy enough, not what they expected from Marvel.
Yeah, I see both sides. It's like the show was trying to walk this tightrope between honoring the source material, that focus on traditional kung fu, but also fit into the mold of a big budget superhero action series.
And that tension, that push and pull, I think that's at the heart of why Iron Fist is so fascinating to analyze. It's a show that's juggling a lot, and it doesn't always succeed. But it raises some important questions about what we expect from different genres, the choices storytellers make, and of course the whole debate about representation, which, oh boy, we got to talk about that next.
Yeah, no way around it. Yeah. The casting of Danny Rand, a white character learning a traditionally Asian martial art, that sparked a lot of controversy.
I got a debate, yeah.
Was it a classic example of the white savior trope? Or is there more to it?
Lots to unpack there. We'll get into all that right after this.
All right, we're back and ready to tackle the elephant in the room, I guess. Maybe the Iron Fist in the room.
Yeah, the big question mark hanging over this whole show.
It's exactly. Before the break, we were talking about those visuals, that kind of dark and gritty vibe. But now let's get into this casting thing. It really got people talking,
Oh, yeah, it definitely sparked a conversation. And it's not just about casting, is it? We're wading into deeper waters here. Representation, cultural sensitivity, the whole impact of storytelling.
Right. It's about more than just who plays a part. It's about, like, how those choices reflect on the real world. And, a lot of you sent in this article about Riz Ahmed's speech, the one where he talks about that white savior trope.
Powerful speech. And yeah, it ties directly into a lot of the criticism around Iron Fist.
Right. For those who haven't heard it, basically it's when a white character sweeps into a non-white culture and becomes the hero, often kind of overshadowing the characters from that culture.
Yeah, and that's a valid concern, especially when we're talking about a character like Danny Rand. His whole deal, his powers, they come from a traditionally Asian martial art.
So some critics were saying casting an Asian American actor would have been a huge statement.
Exactly. A chance to challenge those stereotypes we see so often, to show authentic Asian representation in a genre that honestly hasn't always been great about that.
I get it. I mean, just imagine it for a second. An Asian American Iron Fist up on that screen, mastering kung fu, taking down those mystical baddies. It would have been powerful.
No doubt. But the show's creators and Finn Jones himself, they defended their choice. Their argument was, Danny's story is about more than just his race. It's about identity, about feeling like you don't belong, and trying to balance his Western upbringing with that whole mystical world of Kunlun.
So it's not a simple yes or no kind of thing. There are valid points on both sides.
Right. And in fairness, the show did try to create a diverse cast around Danny.
True. And Colleen Wing, I mean, she's a phenomenal character. Strong, independent. Her own martial arts skills are incredible.
She definitely holds her own. And that's what's so great about Colleen. She's not just there to support Danny. She has her own story, her own reasons for fighting.
I love that about her. She's got depth. She challenges Danny in a way that no one else really does. It shows that Iron Fist, even if it stumbled in some areas, it was trying to push those boundaries of representation.
For sure. And they brought in characters like Bakudo, who leads a rival faction of the Hand. It adds to the complexity of how Asian characters are portrayed. It's not just focused on one hero.
Right, it's a broader picture. Speaking of complex characters, can we circle back to the Meachums for a sec?
Yeah.
Ward, especially. His journey throughout the show. Wow.
Oh, Ward's arc is fascinating. Starts off as this cutthroat businessman.
Right.
Do anything to protect the family empire. But underneath all that...
There's more going on.
so much more. He's vulnerable,
Yeah.
like he's trapped by his ambition and all the baggage that comes with his family history. And as the season goes on, you see him confronting those demons, his messed up relationship with his father, and you start to see that he actually can change.
It's a classic redemption story, but it feels real. You see that struggle, the guilt eating at him. By the end, he's practically a different person.
It's a transformation for sure. And you know what's interesting? Even the show's visual style mirrors that change.
Really? How so?
Think about it. At the start, everything's super dark, brooding, right? Kind of reflects Ward's headspace. But as he starts finding some redemption, things get brighter, more vibrant.
Wow, you're right. I never thought of it that way, but the visuals do change along with him. It's like the show itself is kind of shedding that darkness.
Exactly.
Uh,
They're using those visuals to highlight what the characters are going through emotionally. And speaking of journeys, Iron Fist wasn't just about how individual characters grow. It also delved into some bigger stuff, like colonialism, corporate greed,
yeah, heavy stuff.
heavy stuff, the exploitation of communities that don't have the power to fight back. That's where the whole Rand Corporation angle comes in.
Right. It's not just a setting. It's like this symbol of power, wealth, and all the nasty things that come with it.
Exactly. And the show doesn't shy away from it. They dig into the company's past, all the shady dealings, how they exploited resources and people, how they kept that cycle of inequality going. It's a reminder that even in a world with kung fu and superpowers, these real-world problems, they don't just disappear.
Nope. They're always there, lurking beneath the surface. So we've got this intricate web of characters, these big, complex themes, and a visual style that changes as the story unfolds. But, maybe this is a hot take. I think one of the most overlooked things about Iron Fist is its humor.
Oh, absolutely. It's got this dry wit, this self-awareness that you might miss if you're not paying attention.
Remember that scene where Danny's trying to explain chi to Ward, and Ward's just like, yeah, magic punches.
Classic. Or when Colleen's teaching that self-defense class, totally straight-faced, and she's like, this move is called the disgruntled landlord, super effective against eviction notices.
The show doesn't take itself too seriously all the time. Even in a world with mystical threats and crazy fights, there's still room to laugh.
Totally. Those moments of levity keep things balanced. They remind us that even when the stakes are high, life can still be kind of absurd. And I think that's one of the strengths of Iron Fist. It embraces that weirdness. It doesn't shy away from the darkness, but it throws in those bits of humor and heart.
It's a show that keeps you on your toes. It plays with your expectations, challenges the superhero formula. It might not have always stuck the landing, but it definitely left a mark.
It got people talking, that's for sure.
Man, those Iron Fist writers, they snuck in some good jokes, huh? Didn't expect that from a show about, mystical kung fu and destiny and all that.
Right. Like underneath all that serious stuff, there's this layer of wit that you might miss if you're not paying attention. But hey, we were also talking about some pretty heavy themes, right? The whole corporate greed thing, the legacy of colonialism.
Yeah, that's what makes this whole deep dive thing so interesting, isn't it? We're not just talking about, like, how cool the fight scenes look, but the ideas behind it all, the stuff that really makes you think.
It's about context, right? Understanding where these stories come from, what they're trying to say. And, we have to be honest here. Iron Fist, even with its good intentions, it did stumble in some places, that casting controversy. It sparked a huge debate, talk about representation.
Yeah, and not just in this show. It's a bigger conversation, right? About Hollywood, about who gets to tell these stories, who gets to be the hero.
It's about challenging those old ways of thinking, pushing for more authenticity both on screen and behind the scenes, making sure everyone feels like they have a place in these stories.
It's like that saying, if you can see it, you can be it, right? Mm-hmm. Representation matters. It shapes how we see ourselves, how we see the world. And when we see ourselves reflected in those stories, in those heroes, man, that's powerful.
It's about possibilities, seeing that anything is possible, no matter who you are, where you come from. But when those stories are filled with stereotypes or when whole groups of people are just missing, well, that sends a different message, a harmful one.
So Iron Fist, maybe it wasn't perfect, but it got people talking. And that's a good thing, right? It made us confront some uncomfortable truths, challenge those old assumptions.
And that's a conversation we got to keep having, pushing creators to think harder about the stories they're telling, to use their platform to lift up those voices that have been silenced for too long.
So for everyone listening out there, here's something to think about as you continue to explore Iron Fist. As you watch movies, read books, play games, think about representation, ask questions, demand better. Your voice matters. And the choices you make, they can help change how stories are told. Keep those deep dives going.